Thank you for tuning in to Planting Seeds, Philanthropy in Saskatchewan, a podcast where we aim to connect you to the community impact that is empowered by donors and charities across the prairies. I'm your host, Victor Roman, from the South Saskatchewan Community Foundation. I hope you enjoyed the listen. So today I am joined by Melissa Coomber-Bendsten. Melissa is the CEO of YWCA Regina and has been in that position since 2015, so just over 7 years now. She's joining us today to tell us how the YWCA impacts our community and its members and the important role that donors and philanthropy have on that impact. So welcome, Melissa. It's great to have you here today.
Yeah, thank you kindly for having me.
For sure. So I kept that introduction short. I felt like it would be more appropriate to maybe just ask you to talk a little bit about, your role there and what the YWCA does, like what the purpose, the mission is. So if you want to just enlighten me a little bit on what's going
Yeah,
on.
absolutely. Thanks, Victor. Um, I've the great honor, really, it is an honor to lead this organization and have been doing so, as you said, which is crazy to think that it's been just over 7 years, but also 7 years, because that piece is always a bit mind-boggling. Um, the YWCA looks to ignite the equitable inclusion of women and children into all facets of society to the benefit of everyone. And I think that as a feminist organization, we recognize the importance of not only doing that from a gendered perspective, but also centering the needs of those folks that are marginalized or face barriers due to race, economic status, gender and sexual diversity, etc. And so um, this work is one that is incredibly difficult, but also being able to spend my days and my time and energy um, working for the community and um, and creating purpose and impact in the community um, is really where the honor comes in.
Yeah, that's awesome. So just to kind of touch on this, because I guess part of what we want to talk about is, you're the organizations that are making the impact in the community. And the
Mhm.
reality of it, just unfortunately in the world we live, is that you can't do that without money, and that's where the donors become a really important role. And I know you. One thing I guess I've witnessed with the YWCA specifically is that you really push the boundaries. Like you're some of the first ones to talk about uh, gender issues and really lead that in our community. So when it comes to engaging with a donor and really bringing them on board and getting them to, I guess, live and breathe your mission and understand that and become empathetic to that cause, like what do you do? How do you bring people on board and get them to maybe realize something that they maybe hadn't before, or become passionate about something that your organization stands for?
hmm Yeah, that's a really interesting question because I think, when I really when I took this position and then really dove into the world of philanthropy because we had plans on a capital campaign, and so I knew I needed to not just understand it from an operational sustainability perspective, but that I was going to jump in feet first into the world of donor relations and what that looks like. It became very clear to me early on that the idea behind or this, I guess I should say, the same philosophy that we use in relationship building um, for the folks that we work with, with an acknowledgement that every person that comes through our doors is an individual that has um, that has specific and unique needs of support or advocacy or whatever it might be is the strength that we brought also that same philosophy to the idea of donor relations and philanthropy, in that every donor um, in building that relationship is also a unique individual, and to come at it from that place made me recognize and realize that there were also needs there, and I think I'm in constant awe of how our community in Regina and the province of Saskatchewan has a deep rooted foundation of wanting to give back to their community, whether that's through service to the community, like the work that I do, or whether that's through donations, whether that's through volunteering. There's so many aspects to that, and so playing off of that kind of rooted sense of community and the fact that everybody was unique, I think it gave me an ability to understand then how to start those relationships
Hmm.
and how to understand how that functions. So then it was about connecting people to the story, but it was also about learning who they were and what their connections were, and how they wanted to be donors.
Hmm.
And I think fundamentally, going at it from the perspective of it's an important thing to do, whether the funds come directly to the YW or they go to another community organization or a cause that the YW works for or a different cause. That what was important in stewarding that kind of idea that it's important for people to give back in some capacity. Um, that was what was most important. And so for me, it became less about, I think what people see it as asking for money and
Hmm.
more about understanding how people wanted to show up uh,
Hmm.
for their community, and then navigating which cause, what work was most important to them. How were they going to? What kind of impact did they want to have in the community? And I've never felt um, failed. I've never felt like I've failed if somebody chooses to donate to another community organization or another project or another cause. I think that in and of itself has been a success and worth my time to build that relationship with that donor or that partner.
That makes sense. And I totally
Hmm.
understand that too, because you're in a unique role where, and I think what I kind of gathered from that, and correct me if you're wrong or if I'm wrong, but it's really more that being authentic and not trying to sell somebody something that they don't want to buy. Like
Hmm.
if you're looking at it from that, it's really being authentic is going to be the most successful route, I guess. And like you
Hmm.
say, one of the best things here is it's not like, say, we're not like a car salesman where
No.
if someone goes and buys from another dealer, it's just you lose money. The reality of someone goes to another charity, they're still helping the community. So that's really a win. It's a win-win no matter where people go. And
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. If I had to sort of follow that line of, because it can seem that way, I think from the outside, I think that there's some assumptions there that I had certainly about the kind of car salesman. I mean, I would have quit a long time ago. That's not it's not my
Yeah.
strength, not where my passion lies, and it would not have worked. So yeah.
One thing I admire about our community that I've noticed ever since I've only been in the nonprofit sector for, about 3 years, 3 or 4 years myself, but I really see an urge to collaborate.
Hmm.
And there isn't a lot of a feeling of competition, which I think is really important for our communities, specifically here in South Saskatchewan, to thrive. And it's nice to see that.
Hmm.
Um, one question I have for you, when a donor comes to you, if they were to ask the question, okay, I want to give to the YWCA and I want to make sure my donation has the biggest impact it can, what would be some of the things you would be suggesting to them, or tips you might give them?
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because I think part of it would be to learn about the not just the organization, but learn about the program and its purpose as much as you possibly can. I've seen this um, in our new Center for Women and Families, our new capital build, where
Hmm.
donors come forward and they have aligned values and they know where they want to make their donation and their gift. Um, but then there's this other sense of, and I know this, there's this other curiosity about, what are the issues? What we've outlined what our problem sort of statement is and what we're trying to do and the impact that'll have. But but even deeper than that, like what are the causes of this? and why is that happening, and the rest of it. So I would say to a donor, ask those questions. Maybe donors feel that they don't want to. Well, in fact, I know this because I've heard donors say this before, like, I don't want to take up too much of your time, or I don't maybe potentially want to look like I don't know the answers to this, or um, make you feel as an organization that I don't trust the work that you're doing, and the way in which you're using my money. Um, but I have some questions, and I think I would say to a donor, feel comfortable asking those, because I think um, that kind of education will make your donation and your gift um, so much more impactful because of two things. One, because you understand it clearer, so you can see the outcomes in a different way when you have that kind of understanding and knowledge. And two, because the likelihood that you're going to then go on and have that conversation with somebody else
Mm,
is really high, because it's new information you've just learned here. You've made this donation, and the likelihood you're going to talk to somebody else of that with that is really high. That in of itself is a huge impact. So being able to, anytime I have a donor who's interested in more information, I take that time and give them as much information and background as they have time to digest, because I know part of the work isn't just about handing over dollars or signing a check, but it's also about being a super fan, we call them here, super fan
yeah.
of the project, or an advocate in the community. And every community organization has an underlying kind of advocacy piece, an
Hmm.
education piece, that their programs and services would be enhanced, would be sustainable, would be better if the rest of the community understood the issues that they're facing, or the people are facing that they serve. And so um, that is probably almost as important as sometimes supporting financially the programs and services, is that education
Hmm.
piece, and having those super fans in the community is really important. And it's even doubled its impact when somebody says, I financially support the YWCA because of this, and they know
Yeah.
what this is. So I would say to a donor, ask those questions. It doesn't, it's never made me anyway feel like the work we're doing, or the experts that we have on our staff, or the focus we choose should be questioned. It's never made me feel that way.
Yeah.
It's only made me feel like this person is investing more than just their money. Um,
Yeah.
so I think I'd say that, and of course, it's not always possible. Not all donors have time to learn about all the issues that they're supporting, and that's okay too.
Hmm.
But uh, but I think that's something I've learned over time, how just much better connected people are, and how much further their impact can go when there's a deep understanding of what that's like. Hmm.
So I have a question, and I think I know the answer to it, or at least part of the answer. But you talk about kind of creating those super fans. So,
Hmm.
what are ways that your organization goes about trying to create those super fans? Like, is that something you're doing through campaigns or anything like that?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it is about the relationships. Like 100%, it's about those individual relationships, and looking as much as possible at our donors, as individuals, as each with their own sort of plan that wraps around them, of how we're going to
Hmm.
communicate and do that with. We also do campaigns that sort of you have less of a connection, then a personal connection with donors, but there's still always, I think it doesn't matter how much. This is another one of our philosophies that runs through the entire fund development program, is it doesn't matter how much the gift is, a donor is a donor. And so
Hmm.
doing that good stewardship to build relationships, whether it's somebody that's just attended walk a mile in her shoes and has fundraised for us through a campaign platform, or
Hmm.
somebody who's made a transformational gift to our Center for Women and Families. I think how we connect with those folks, how we provide information, how we thank those folks is all very similar.
Hmm.
And that's part of it, is just building that relationship, because I think then you can connect those super fans. Maybe it's not at the immediate time that they first make their donation, but
Hmm.
over time, that can happen.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one thing to keep in mind too, is that, the I don't know, I guess like the term we would use in a community foundation is donor stewardship, but it really is relationship building, and the awareness of what you're doing and the buy-in of what you're doing. Really, at the end of the day, is what equates all that. And
Hmm.
one thing that I've observed that I really like that your organization does is the walk a mile in her shoes.
Hmm.
And the reason why I like that is because it being able to actually get somebody to like experience something for themselves, put themselves in the situation, and really engage with it from that lens, just
Hmm.
leaves such a long impact. So
Hmm.
I know for a fact that a lot of long-term donors and volunteers and advocates participate in that, and it's like a perfect opportunity for them to invite in their community and their peers and their friends and grow it that way, and just kind of have that stepping stone into realizing, oh, this is what the why does.
Hmm.
This is a gist of how this feels, and then I'm also learning about just the realities of some of the issues that women and people of other genders face
Yeah,
throughout their lives.
absolutely. Yeah, and it becomes this. I think that event particularly becomes, and the idea of wearing red shoes is sort of symbolic kind of action is really a catalyst for discussion, you know.
Hmm.
And while our events raise money, we really see them as the primary focus of being about starting conversations in places, um,
Hmm.
and and advocacy, you know. And that event, you're right, that it's a really easy, kind of safe, fun, you know, space for people to start having conversations with their with other people and bringing people in. And I think
Hmm.
Women of Distinction is another example of that, you know, where um, we use the incredible accolades of women in our community to have other women, to bring other women in, and other
Yeah.
people, not just women, but other people into that celebration of
Yeah.
of the incredible work that that women do in our community. And so I think those things are really important in that idea of creating super fans or building those kinds of relationships over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you and do you ever run into an instance where maybe the YWCA is moving into a new territory or really focusing on a community need that maybe is could be seen by some as like controversial or just uncomfortable? And do you have any experiences kind of walking a donor through something where maybe they were kind of like, whoa, I don't know if I'm on board for this, and getting them on board for this? Is that something you've ever run into or run into often with your relationships there?
Yeah. You know, I think somewhat. I would say, you know, we're pretty clear on our stance on issues that that could potentially be what you're talking about, and we're fairly clear on that. So I would say that, you know, people who don't align with those kinds of values probably aren't the people that are approaching us for donations or who
Mm,
are interested for donations. Um, but I would say maybe it's a little bit less of those situations have happened. But you know, interestingly, it's uh, part of also moving people through, or donors through, an idea um, of what kind of impact they're going to have, or what kind of impact they think they should have, or I should say, what kind of impact they think we should have in the community,
hmm.
is one of those things that can sometimes be really challenging. And
Mm,
understanding that donors also, you know, from a trauma informed lens, donors also have a history, and they also have experiences, traumas, you know, uh, um, yeah, life experiences that affect the way they see the world and navigate the world. And so we
Hmm.
always talk about, we meet people where they're at and support them where they want to go. And so I
Yeah.
think using that same philosophy with donors is meeting them where they're at, whether it's their knowledge, their life experience, um, oftentimes, sometimes their privilege, recognizing where they're at and supporting
Hmm.
where they want to go. So if supporting the YWCA, affordable housing is a great example of this. Really giving them information that we know that they can digest and connect to, given where they're at, and helping to support them to learn and grow as well. Because I hope that our donors have are impacted, their lives are impacted through their donation, not just through, the things that happen when somebody supports community, but that they also
Hmm.
learn and that they also grow, and that they can see something new and different for themselves through their donation to the YW. So I think it's really interesting. I find myself often, um, having to really maybe pull back and understand where a donor is at, and then figure
Yeah.
out how to support them where I know they want to go. And it's not out of, lack of caring or kindness, or but sometimes it's just not knowing the truth, or not having the right information. And
Yeah.
so I would say I navigate that more than I navigate somebody who, isn't necessarily aligned with our values, because I'm not sure those people are knocking at our door to begin with.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And yeah, that's a good point though too. Is that like one of the things I've always said is we all speak a common language, but we don't actually speak the same language,
Hmm.
in the sense that yeah, to actually get somebody to understand something, you have to try to get it. You have to try to, or I guess the most successful way to do it is to try to understand where they come from, how
Absolutely.
they speak, the world that they're from, and how it looks from that world, opposed to
Hmm.
just assuming that they have the knowledge or perspective that you have.
Hmm.
And everybody's perspective is different. So depending
Absolutely.
on how you grew up, where you live, just
Hmm.
everything really.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
it makes a big difference, I think,
Hmm.
when you just understand that you can't just copy and paste the conversation and expect really anyone to resonate with it. It's got to be personal. It has to be specific to the person you're talking to, no matter what the
Absolutely.
situation.
Yeah, because you also run the risk of like shutting them out, right?
Hmm.
Because there isn't that connection, or because indirectly through education you've called them out,
Hmm.
and I think while there's a time and place for that in our world, building relationships and and working towards reconciliation, for example, is not that time. It's about calling in, or and that's the philosophy and role that we take. So yeah.
Can you kind of elaborate more on what you mean, kind of by calling out versus calling in?
Yeah, I think that, like, in those situations where people, or when we're building relationships, I should say, with donors or partners, I think and you recognize that people all come to that table with their own lived experience and their own, perspectives on life, that may not always acknowledge the role of power and privilege in our community, for example, in our world,
Hmm.
in our society. When you're trying to show somebody that potentially their views on something is affected by power or privilege, um, it's a tightrope walk to do that. And I think for me, I've always found much more success and growth and learning by calling somebody into that conversation rather than calling out the situation. Because my end goal is about a relationship.
Hmm.
It is what I'm putting value on there. And so having those conversations, through educating and patience and really understanding where that person's at that point, um, and time, I think there's been some incredible um, self realizations from our donors, recognition from our partners, and then ultimately change. I mean, I think that's how change happens.
Absolutely. Okay, I think I have time for one more point
Okay.
before we probably have to go. And this is something I'm just kind of curious about. I don't think we discussed it beforehand,
Mhm,
so if there isn't much of an update, that's fine. But I was just thinking, you mentioned the capital campaign
mhm,
for the new location, and I know that a lot of that kind of started and has been happening through a global pandemic. And I'm just curious, how did that how has that impacted your ability? Are you still kind of going forward strong with it?
mhm,
What's the status of that campaign, and what have you maybe seen shift during that odd period to be launching a campaign like that?
mhm. Yeah, so when COVID hit, we were starting the silent phase of our capital campaign for that. And so of course we were just floored at, what is going to happen and what is this going to mean? And in the first, I think it was 3 or 4 months of the pandemic, um, we raised close to $9 million,
Oh wow.
so it was phenomenal. And I think part of it was an understanding of and just a deep commitment from the community to this project, in recognizing the kind of impact it would have. That certainly plays a part in it. But I also think it was yeah, I'm not sure anybody would say this, but it was a good time to connect with folks, and be able to do that in a more sort of efficient and effective way. I think people were
Hmm.
looking for ways to support the community, and also looking at sustainable long term kind of ways. So the project, we're getting ready for a big announcement this summer.
Oh great.
And so I won't say it all on and disclose everything on this very
Yeah.
podcast, but there is a big announcement coming um, this summer, and we're really excited about that. I think there was a recognition um, during the global pandemic as well of just how disproportionately it affected women, and even more so marginalized folks. And when
Hmm.
something like that happens, you start to see what was sort of always there.
Hmm.
And we've coined this, of course, the shadow pandemic, and that certainly came to light. Like those that were vulnerable before, um,
Yeah.
you saw the disproportionate issues that happened in those communities. And so I think it's never been clearer. I think we've been talking a little bit about, like, when truth, and certainly the Truth and Reconciliation Commission talks about how important truth is. And it was pretty hard to avoid truth during the pandemic, from a gendered perspective, and from a race perspective, and from an ability perspective. I mean, the list just goes on and on. It
Hmm.
was pretty hard to not see that. And um, and so I think that's had an impact as well on on the support that we've seen for
Yeah.
what will be a really innovative um, um, project. So we're excited about that. Stay
That's
tuned.
great. We will. No, that is a to kind of wrap it up. I think it's a good way to wrap it up. Is that even that being able to raise that sort of money during such an uncertain time,
Mhm,
I think really does show the community buy-in that
mhm,
exists for your organization, and
mhm,
the importance of that long-term commitment, the long-term messaging, the long-term relationships. Because without that, people don't know what you do.
mhm,
It's a lot harder, especially in a moment where they're looking, okay, we know people need it.
mhm.
Where are we going to make the biggest impact? Clearly, you're on that list, so
Yeah.
that's good to know. And I know from SSCF's perspective,
Mhm,
donors often are granting towards you, whether it
yeah.
be competitive or not. So
Mhm,
um, obviously, we are appreciative that we're able to help out and help connect our donors to your organization
mhm.
as well. And we wish you all the luck in the future. It's been great having you today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Victor. It's much appreciated.
Thank you for listening today. If you'd like to learn more, visit South Saskatchewan Community Foundation at sscf.ca or find us on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Just search South Saskatchewan Community Foundation. And of course, make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're tuning in from.